facing the school, and why there are some serious unanswered questions about what's going on with potential cuts to teachers at DCIS, and that would mean, of course, fewer courses available, potentially the elimination of one of the languages, and again, a probably permanent damage done to the DCIS mission, culture, and of course the success of our kids. So all the information you're about to see are from public documents. They're either DPS documents or State of Colorado budget documents from the Department of Education. And what you may hear is that DPS is anticipating, and these are only projections, but are anticipating a decline in enrollment district-wide over the coming years. And actually what is really happening, if you look closely at the numbers, is that there's a steady growth in charter school enrollment, which of course takes money out of our traditional public schools. But as you can see, they are projecting, and this is from their budget documents presented to the Board of Education, a decline of about 3% in enrollment overall. And again, I apologize for their inability to put together a slide that spells enrollment correctly. Maybe that says something about the underlying competency of central administration, given that it's pretty easy to spell check things. But as you can see, people will make the argument, or the argument may be made to you, that enrollment growth, or negative growth in this case, loss of enrollment, is hurting our budget. So as you can see right here, got a 3% decrease in enrollment. Now, why does this matter? Well, it matters, of course, because in the way that the state of Colorado does its budgeting, it's based upon a per student funding model. There's some other adjustments, J-curves for smaller districts and a few other things. But as you can see, this is from the state of Colorado. This is the current year's funding and this is a per pupil, and there's an acronym, it's called PPOR. It's the money coming from the state. It includes an adjustment for the differences in property tax. It's called equalization between districts. But as you can see, the estimated per pupil funding for Denver this current year is about $8,000, specifically $7,939 per student, and that's the amount of money that goes into the school's sort of top line revenue. And as you can see here, the governor's budget request is for about $8,300. It's an increase of about $628. If you do the math, that's a 4% increase. So if you go back and look at that, if you're looking at the top line enrollment projection for the district, they're saying roughly they expect about a 3% decrease. DPS doesn't have a great history with enrollment projections, but those numbers were actually sourced from outside entities. They work with Dr. Cog, the Denver Regional Council of Governments, and a local nonprofit data mining group at the Piton Foundation, which has a fairly reputable track record in terms of doing this sort of thing. But as you can see, if you're cutting 3% from enrollment, yet you're having a 4% increase in funding, it seems that your basic funding level would be about the same or even ahead of the game. Herein lies the issue. And you can see this is echoed through in DPS's own budget documents. This is from earlier this month. This is sort of you can see all the elements here. If you want to take the time and pause the video, whoops, and look at all the things that go into what happens in terms of the dollars coming into the school. But this is the amount of money that DPS is projecting, and that's what the current budget is based on going into each school. And that's a base level of $4,260. Again, that is an increase from the year above, so year before. And this is how DPS does its budgeting. It's called a student-based budgeting plus model. Notice the district keeps a whole lot of that $8,000 coming from the state. About half of it ends up in the school, and then it's bumped up based upon the number of kids that are English language learners, kids that are getting free and reduced lunch, special education needs, GT kids get a little bump. Then there's this slush fund here that they use for what are called innovation schools. There's a boost based upon testing, which actually I believe to be an unconstitutional thing that they do, but nobody's sued DPS yet over this. And then some more special ed and other needs. So that's what we're looking at. Again, DPS is saying more money on the whole is going to be going into schools. DCIS is sort of penalized by the fact that don't have a high concentration of special ed kids, and although I believe we're still over 50% free and reduced lunch, it's not the same sort of boost that some other schools may be getting. And then lastly, you can look at the history here. We've gotten boosts in this total school per pupil spending over the past several years, and this is actually the fiscal year 13-14 was the year in which they introduced this plus model into their budgeting. But while we've seen more money supposedly going into the schools each of these years, DCIS has had budget cuts, cutting teachers or cutting staff almost every year. And I don't know the exact history, but I know that 2 years ago there were cuts, and no, the year before that there were cuts, and the year before that there were cuts. So obviously, if you look at just the top line numbers, there's something going on at DCIS in terms of the budget that's not being fully explained. So if you got questions, leave them as comments in the video below, comments below the video, and I'll see if I can answer them. I'm not a completely resourced on these issues. I did serve 3 years on a CSC at elementary school level, and 2.5 years of those were as a chair. So I have put together and actually done the hard lift of writing school budgets, particularly because our principal at the time was not very good with spreadsheets. And I've been involved in school finance going back to the 1990s, where I was a pollster on a statewide initiative campaign to bring more money, a 1% increase or 1 cent increase in the sales tax across the state to fund education. So I do have some background in this, but I'm not able to answer every question. But I think as you just look at the facts as we know them that are laid out in the public record, there are a lot of unanswered questions about what's happening in terms of how the district is providing resources to DCIS and whether or not we really should be cutting teachers when it looks like year over year we should be anticipating an increase in funding even if we do see a small enrollment decline. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your patience. And please, please contact your school board members. Demand answers. They're your elected representatives. They're the people that are ultimately responsible for whether or not we have the resources to make DCIS the best school that it can be, or whether or not we fall short. Thanks again.